Alright guys, welcome back. It's been a few weeks since I've been back. I've done a bit of cleaning, but yeah, been in a bit of a bludge mode. So today I want to talk about flaring. So I'm in the middle of doing my flares, my brakes, like my brake lines on the buggy, and I thought it'd be a good opportunity to I guess share what I've learnt in doing this process. As you know, a lot of this building this buggy is all about learning. Yeah, so learning a lot. So brake lines. So there's a couple of different flaring processes we can use. Single flare, which is for low pressure sort of stuff, like water lines and things like that. I wouldn't be using a single flare on brakes just because you need the high pressure flare. Double flare and bubble flare. So I'm learning a bit about these since I've started doing these brake lines. Double flare is what I'm using on my lines at the moment. Bubble flare, I've now since learnt that it's more for your newer sort of vehicles, your double flare, older sort of vehicles. But it all depends on this seat. So I've got a little diagram here. Hope you can see that all right. So single flare, we're not using. That's all that is you get the pipe and they just flare it out. That's it. Just one flare out. Single line, like single wall thickness, not as suited for high pressures. So then you get to the double flare. So it's a different process. You'll have to see it when it's getting done. It sort of bubbles kind of like a bubble flare, bubbles that out a bit, but then the same tool you use to do your single is what you use to get that double flare set up. And then your bubble flare, completely different tool. I don't have a bubble flare tool, so I'm not going to do a bubble flare. I'd have to go buy, if I was doing bubble flares on this buggy, I'd have to go and buy a specific tool to do a bubble flare. And then the seating is also different. Let me move that down a bit. Right, so your seating on a double flare is different to a bubble flare. So this, whatever flare you use, whatever line you are making up for a vehicle, it all comes down to this. So you can't have like a newer car that's got this bubble fitting. You can't then just go and buy a double flare tool and put double flare brakes on it. It won't seal properly. You'll probably have a leak. Yeah, don't do it. So it's up to the vehicle that you have, and what fittings they use for their brake lines determines what flare you use. I have seen people use, so the tool to do these, I have seen people flip it upside down and make that out of that same, it's not the same tool. Like, don't do it. It may work, but it's not correct. Anyway, so yeah, so as you can see down here, if we pull, so I've got my hose. So this is the hose that I've got for my buggy. You're not going to be able to see it, but if we look down there, see how it's got that, it's raised. It's actually raised there like that. So that's the bit that this double flare seats over. Yeah. The bubble flare, completely different seat. So they're not interchangeable. So don't even try and do it. Yeah, that's just my 2 cents. I just wanted to share that. But yeah, so double flare, bubble flare. Now the tools, I'll just bring you over here. Alright, so my tool, the tools kit I got for it. So this is one of the average price ones. Like, it's not, you can get fancy ones that have got like a tool post with all your different fittings already in it, and you just wind it around to what you want to do and pull a lever. This particular one, you've got to use the screw down part to seat it. So on this, they got different size holes for different pipe, and it's all written there on what does what. So I'm using the 3/16 pipe. So the idea is I'll just give you a quick little, so you get an idea. If you need to cut this to length, so it's up to you how you want to measure. Tape measures, or it's like a steel tape measure along your diff, say, or along your chassis. And then to cut it, this is just a little cutting tool. So it's got a couple little wheels here, a cutting disc there. You put that in there like that. So I will cut one little bit off just to show you. I'll just cut a tiny bit off the end just to show you. So the idea is to spin this. You don't want to just put the pipe in and just crank on that, or you'll kink it, or you'll like flatten it. So the idea is get a bit of tension, wind it around, wind it around, wind it around. So as I'm turning like that, I get to here, and then I give it a little bit of a turn on the thread, wind it around, a little bit more, wind it around, a little bit more on the thread, wind it around. So each little turn, you're taking like minute cuts, but that's the way you don't kink it. So just keep spinning this handle, which puts the blade in a little bit closer, and then I can feel it getting a bit looser, and there we go. So I don't even know where that went. That went on the ground somewhere, but anyway. So that's my cut. So zoom in. Anyway, that's good enough. You can see that. So that's the cutter. Oh, and on the back of the cutter here. So I've seen people get a file and neaten that up. The outside edge doesn't look too bad. It's more the inside, and you just stick your little pointy tool in there and give it a couple of turns. It's like a little chamfer tool. It's just going to get rid of that rough edge. And if you're worried about the outside edge, either lightly with a file or just a little bit of wet and dry sandpaper just to clean it up. But yeah, so that's it. So that's your cut done. Now we're ready to, so that'll be your length, whatever length you're doing. Alright, so now with this tool. So I've got my vise set up, well not really set up, it's got G-clamps holding the thing to the bench. I'm going to stick that in there. Hopefully that's strong enough. So I've got my cut ends, that one. So 3/16. So I'll find my 3/16 little hole and I'll put that in there. Right, so in my tool kit, there's all these little buttons, I think you'd call them, for different pipe size. So that's a 1/2 inch. It's too big for what we need. So I've got my little one here that says 3/16. And it's only tiny. Alright, so with this button, there's a couple of little steps there. So there's the main big step, then another little step, and then a prong. So the big step, that first big one, the height of that is the height you want your brake line sticking out of your tool. So you just sit that there, and that's pretty close. So I'm pretty happy with that. Yep. So once you've got that set, you do your clamps up. So you want it firm so it doesn't push down. Okay, so then you need this tool, which is your press, I guess you want to call it. So the idea is to get this on here. So it'll sit there like that. And then your little button. So it now goes with the spiky bit in. So it sits there like that. Then you just got to wind this out until it fits over the top. And then I just tighten it up a little bit until you get a bit of tension there. So it holds itself there. And then I will just move this around so it's sitting pretty much up and down. You don't want it going down on an angle or your flare will be crooked, if that makes sense. So that's all there. Now we just do this, turn this down. So what you're doing is you're squashing that button down into your pipe, your brake line, and that's going to cause it to bubble out. That kind of ends up looking like that bubble flare. Alright, so I've done that down until it's flush with the top of your holder, but don't crank, just go enough so it's firm. That's generally enough. And then we're going to undo it. Alright, so the button can come out. We don't need that anymore. And I don't know, I'll try and get you a better view of that. So that's the I guess it looks like a bubble, really, bit of a bubble. And then you use your tool without any button in it, and this is pretty much what you do to make a single flare. You just push this down. So got it firm, straighten it up so it's sitting pretty straight, and then we start winding. So again, you just want it to go down firm, you don't want to drive it into next week. I'll get that thing off. Undo our clamp. And there's the flare. Don't know if you can see that well. But so that's your double flare. Now, the one thing I forgot to mention, if you've made your brake line and all you're doing is flaring both ends, say, don't forget to put your little fitting on which screws in to your hose or whatever you're doing. So I've done it once, I flared both ends and went, ah crap, the nut's not on there. You've pretty much got to start again. You've got to cut it and then put that on. So that's it with the threaded bit on. So that will now fit into the double flare, say my hose for example. So that will then screw into there. So that's your fitting in. Now if you need to bend your line, I'll just take all that apart. If we need to bend this line, let me just put that in there so I don't lose it. Just got this cheapy sort of bender. I have seen people bend these by hand. You'd probably kink it. Yeah, I'd rather, you're best off using a tool. So the idea is loaded it. Oh, so on here there's 3/16, a quarter, 5/16 and 3/8. So that's what this bender can do. As you can see, I had different size buttons in here. I had a 1/2 inch. This bender won't do the 1/2 inch. I had to buy this, or when I was looking for one of these, I had to pick one that had the 3/16 on it because I was doing 3/16 line. So load it in. You do have degree increments around your, like a dial around here, so as you bend it you can kind of get an idea of what your angles are at. But when I did my brake lines, I wasn't really getting a protractor out and working out angles. It was a visual thing, and the brake line wasn't that critical, like to go around say the diff, like your diff center bowl, it's not that critical, so it's more of a visual thing. So yeah, so load your pipe in. Let's say I want to go about 90 degrees. So that's telling me 90 on the dial. But if you look at it like that, it's not quite 90 there like that. So I'm just going to go a little bit more. So this tool is quite stiff. Needs a bit of lube in there. Anyway, so yeah, that little hinge bit should move a bit freely so I can actually move it around a bit easier to get this in and out a bit easier. So anyway, that's the bend I just did. So it's, ignore that, that's not straight. But yeah, so that's pretty close to 90 degree. That's more of a visual. That wasn't a going off that. I probably went to about what would that be? I nearly moved that to 100 degrees to get a 90 degree bend. But yeah, so, and also with straightening, like, that's just straight off the roll with me manually unrolling it, and then I just cut a section off. You can get tools to straighten this if you want it perfectly straight. Depends how bad it is. Like, yeah, anyway. So, yeah, bender. So, recap. We've gone through single flares we're not doing. Where's my texter? Single flares. No. Low pressure stuff like water lines and crap like that. Wouldn't even use it on it. Don't even think about using it on a brake system. Double flare, which is what I'm using on my Patrol, GU Patrol, diff housings, brake lines, all the rest of it. So the calipers, everything on here, use the double flare. So that's where I'm going. So explain that. Explain the seat, how the seat's actually different, how it looks different, and when you look down there, you can actually see the different seat. You can actually see it bubbled up like that. It's not tapered the other way, which leads to the bubble. So the bubble's tapered the other way inside the seat, and the whole fitting up there looks completely different. So newer cars, but again, it depends on the car as to which one you use, and that's just something you've got to either Google or pull the one apart that's on there. Speaking of that, so this is the old brake line that came off the diff, or another diff, not this particular diff, but that is the double flare fitting there, and it's the same. Where'd my one go? It's the same there. Same piece. So I know the double flare is correct for my vehicle because that's what came off it. Yeah, so that's it. I just wanted to give you a quick rundown on what I'm learning as I'm going with all these stuff. Awesome learning doing this buggy. Yeah, quick rundown on the brakes. Not really where I'm at. I've still got a bit to do. Still half cleaning. I've only half cleaned the shed. Still looks like a bomb site. But yeah, so yeah, hopefully that helped someone. It definitely helped me looking into it. Didn't really know the difference between the bubble and the double until you do your own research and learn that sort of stuff. But yeah, so just thought I'd pass that on. Some people I've seen doing bubble flares with the tool to do the double flares, and yeah, cringy. But anyway, cool. So yeah, I will hopefully be up here. I've got another week and a half before I go back to work. Definitely need to come up here. You start counting down the days to, like, I don't know when the next comp is. He hasn't released those dates yet, but yeah, if it's around the same time as it was this year, like next year, I've got like 3 swings or 4 swings off, probably 3 swings to get it done, to give me some driving time, which seems like a lot. 3 swings off is 4 weeks of swing, so that's 12 weeks, 3 months. When you say, oh, I've got 3 months, you're like, whoa, that doesn't sound like much. But anyway, see how we go. And I'll probably do one more video before I go back to work. And yeah, then back to work for 4 weeks. Cool. All right, so I will talk to you all guys later. See ya.